Today I'm joined by a woman who is redefining what it means to be strong, vibrant and visible at any age. You may know Beth Chamberlin from her days as an Emmy-nominated actress, including on TV soaps Guiding Light and Days of Our Lives. Now at 62, she's a gym owner and fitness influencer, helping other women to reclaim their power and refuse to fade. Today you'll hear how she caused producers to rethink her value and how her character was portrayed as a midlife woman.
When I hit 40, the show that I was on, Guiding Light, sort of saw me as expendable, not valuable, as I was saying.
At 40.
I was 41. At 41.
She shares her fitness and skincare regimen.
What concerns me is so many women spend so much time on these treatments, and we have to start thinking of it as all being one thing.
And how, after a recent frightening diagnosis, she's building back stronger than ever.
When I got that cancer diagnosis, that was the first voice in my head too. Well, that cancer doesn't know who it's dealing with.
Whether you're looking for a fitness spark or inspiration for flourishing and staying vital in midlife and beyond, Beth shares how it's done. Beth, it's great to meet you. Your Instagram posts have been a source of inspiration for me on so many levels, which we're going to be hearing all about today. So thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm so appreciative to be on here and get a chance to talk to you as well.
No, well, I'm looking forward to hearing all about you, because we didn't have the pleasure of watching you in your soap acting years over here in the UK. So I'd love to hear about the earlier days of your acting career and what it meant to you to break into TV acting and how you felt about yourself in those early days.
Excellent question, because I am someone that before I ever got that first job when I broke in, I had my I'm not good enough story. Mm-hmm. And we all have the I'm not good enough story. And I had it big time in my ear, in my head, saying, no, you can't really do this. You're not good enough to do this. And I had to do a lot of mental work to get myself to a place where I felt that I was good enough and that I had the confidence to carry myself through the audition and through the screen test and what have you. And really what I started with was Louise Hay's book, You Can Heal Your Life. And that simple affirmation that she talks about, which is, I love and approve of myself. And I was saying that probably repeating it so much that it was probably when I went to bed at night, when I went to sleep, it was probably running on replay in my head. But it was something that I really needed to do. I was born with a birth defect. Mm-hmm. Bilateral in my urinary tract. But what that meant for me was that for the first 6 years of my life, it was just a lot of pain because I was in the hospital having surgeries all the time, surgeries that didn't work. The final surgery I had when I was 6 years old did work, and that felt great. And I was finally like other kids. But then a couple of years later, I started having seizures. Oh. I turned out to have epilepsy, and they gave me one medicine after another, wasn't working. So once again, I feel like I'm the weirdo kid that is having seizures. And finally, I find a medication that works. Now, that was a form of epilepsy that I did grow out of once I hit adolescence. But then I hit adolescence, and when I was that in those first 6 years, I had to be on medication all the time. And what would happen is the bacteria would build up a resistance to whatever medication, so they'd have to switch. And back then, they didn't have as many medications. So at one point, they had to put me on tetracycline, which, if you know about tetracycline, when children have this, it turns the baby teeth as well as the permanent teeth a gray color. Oh. And it's not the enamel, so it can't be bleached out. It's the root of the tooth. So for me, I finally get through all this stuff. And then I become hyper aware when I become a teenager that my teeth are gray. And so that was very painful. I remember at one point, my boyfriend telling me that people would say to him, well, how can you date her? You know, her teeth, or doesn't that bother you? And I love this guy. And it was just, it was very tough. And I had to do a lot of mental work to get to that point where I thought I was good enough. And it's beyond having the acting skills. I had the acting skills. It was that voice in my head that was saying that I wasn't good enough. It was a breakthrough, not just as an actor. It was a breakthrough as a person, getting that first role.
It sounds it. I mean, I was very touched by what you said there because my youngest son is autistic, and I've observed in him that lots of things are harder for him. And then, you know, he's had other diagnoses on top of that. Now he has agoraphobia. And I get this sense from him that he feels like he's being punished because he's not good enough. He's less than. And as you were talking, I thought, I bet that's how you felt as a child. Like, why me? I must be less than these other people.
You don't know anyone else that's going through this, really, exactly what you're going through anyhow. And you are feeling, it definitely puts something in your head that in some ways, even as much work as you do, it's always going to be there. This sense of, if I could just be perfect enough, if I could just be perfect enough, then I could get through this. This is the good thing that I will say about that. I bless it all now. All these years later, I bless all that so much now, because that's what gave me grit as once I got to that adulthood. And I'll tell you, I always tell people I have this moment. I had started taking dance classes, and I loved Tina the Ballerina was the big toy when I was a little girl. And so I started taking dance classes, but I missed a lot of the dance classes because I was sick or I was hospitalized all the time that first year. So when we got to the recital, I look up and I see my friends are in this other act that I remember was called Glowworm. It was the most incredible act. And I said to my mother, why aren't I in that? And she said, because you can't do the things that those girls can do.
Oh.
And I couldn't because I had missed so much. And I remember saying to myself, this will never happen to me again. And you know what happened was, that summer, while other kids were out playing, you know, dance classes were off for the summer, I was in my living room practicing every day. So when I got back in the fall, I wasn't the worst. I was one of the best. That has carried me through my life, that grit. So your son may not believe it now, but it's a gift. And especially today, so many young people coming up are missing this essential grit. And in life is always going to throw some curves at you. So having that grit, having that ability to dig deep because you have had to, is going to be his greatest superpower.
It's a beautiful thing, and I will tell him. Thank you. I'm impressed there, actually, that you got onto that at an early age. And understood about things like affirmations and so on. I mean, it took me till I was nearly 50, really, to figure out that it all comes from within.
Yes.
It's what we tell ourselves about who we are and what life is to us. And then it just becomes that very thing. Finding that, how did you find that? How did you figure out, you know what, this is a mindset thing and not just life happening to me and at me?
It was just the right person. My boyfriend actually was given this Louise Hay book, You Can Heal Your Life. He had never read it, but it was sitting there on his shelf. And I remember, and I said, can I borrow this? And when I started reading it, I thought, this is me. Now, I do want to say that I've actually spent, since that time, I would say 40 years trying to figure out, okay, what was the missing piece? What was the missing piece? Because what did happen to me was during that time, I started to date someone who then I couldn't make a move without him judging me. Everything I did, everything I was, everything, what I looked like, everything was lacking somehow. And I bought right into it. And I thought at the time that I was in love with him. What I realized now was he was tapping into that inner darkness that still existed in me. And so there was probably a part of me that thought, if I can get his approval, I'll get my approval, is what was really happening. But that cratering confidence that happened ultimately made my life, so here I was, I succeeded, and then I crashed again. You have to engage the mind, and you have to do those things. And Louise Hay's book is wonderful. But the body's there too. You've got to engage the body. And I'll tell you, I tell people, one of the fastest ways to increasing your self-worth is strength training, working out. Because what's going to happen is when you go to the gym or you're working out on your own, whatever you're doing, and you're working with a weight, you are teaching yourself, number one, you do tough things. You start to move up in weight and you start doing tough things that you didn't think you could do. That translates into your life. And it is an experiential moment for you where you expand your belief of what you can handle and who you are. But as an actor, I know that motion creates emotion, right? As an actor, one of the things you can use to get yourself into a character is a specific movement, an action that can really anchor you in your character. William James, who's considered the father of American psychology, and Carl Lang, who was a Danish researcher, this was decades ago, both discovered at the same time physiological changes precede emotion. So in other words, we don't smile because we're happy because we smile. We don't stand up straight because we're confident because we stand up straight. What's going on in our bodies is sending a message to our brain about how we should feel. So what I always ask people, what message is your body sending to your brain hour after hour, day after day? I had this experience that when I hit 40, the show that I was on, Guiding Light, sort of saw me as expendable, not valuable anymore. As I was saying,
At 40.
I was 41. At 41. I always say, apparently that's 123 in Hollywood years.
Yeah.
I was like, wait a minute, 41, what? And at that time is when I really started exercising. I was not someone that ever exercised. Once I hit 20, I didn't do anything for about 20 years. I hated exercising. I couldn't stick with anything. And then I started.
And you started because you became aware of your age and how you were aging and people making kind of noises, whispers about it.
They took me off contract, which means I don't have a guaranteed number of episodes anymore. I don't have a guaranteed income anymore. And so I was still being written, but I was kind of like the mother in the background kind of thing. So I did not want to gain any weight because when you're on a show like that, if you're a size 4, they buy you the size 4, but then they alter it to your body. I didn't want to gain weight because that would give them another reason for writing me less. I'm not fitting in my clothes. They have to buy me more clothes. It started because I went away on a week with my husband and 2 friends that they all exercised. Every year we went on this vacation. Every year I gained 10 pounds because I didn't exercise. I would gain 10 pounds in a week. I'd come back, none of my clothes on the show would fit me. So this year we're going on this vacation. I can't gain 10 pounds this year. So I had to start exercising. And that was the beginning of it for me. There's a book written by Benjamin Hardy called Willpower Doesn't Work. He says the number one way that we can create a real change is through an environmental change, which is what happened to me, right? I was surrounded by people that were doing this. I was in this cabin away.
You just had to follow along.
Exactly. I just had to follow along. And that week changed my life. I mean, honestly, I tell people that had that week not happened, I would probably today be an unhealthy, extremely overweight alcoholic.
Wow.
And I say that because at the time I was drowning my cratered confidence in unhealthy habits, whether it was sugar or whether it was wine every night. And it was a very unhealthy place. And that week, Benjamin Hardy calls it a forcing function, an event that changes your default behavioral patterns, which that's what it did for me that week. And I subsequently started training with a kettlebell. It changed my body, but it changed who I was. So when they took me off contract, now they're not using me very much anymore. Then they took away my dressing room.
Oof.
So that is a big,
In Hollywood
yeah,
terms, that sounds really harsh.
that's big. That's basically saying you're not part of the club.
Yeah.
You're not valuable to us anymore. We don't even have a place for you. We'll put you wherever we can find a corner, basically.
And how many years had you been on that show at that point?
8 years. 8
Yeah.
years.
Oh,
And I was a
that
leading
is
lady.
tough.
So you're going from here to, I always tell the story that about 4 months after I started strength training, I had changed as a person. As I said, the message that my body was now, I had a strong core, I was strong. The message that my body was sending my brain every day was that I was powerful. I was confident. And I was having this experience where I could do tough things with that kettlebell. And so it was expanding what I felt that I could do, the tough things I could do on the outside. So about 4 months after I started training, I went into one of the producers' offices and said, I want a dressing room. And not just for me, but for 3 other actresses you've given the boot to as well. And I got it.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah. So, and then the other end of that story is that's funny. So they're writing me as the mother, as kind of a granny in my 40s. And so about 6 months after I started strength training, I look at the schedule. I'm in every day. Wait a minute. What's going on? I open my first script. My character is in bed with a 20-year-old.
That's quite the turnaround.
And what I always say, though, about that is, the writers didn't change. I changed. And when I changed, the world around me changed. So what I learned from that is, people will treat you how you show up. I had a very defeated, and I know I had this defeated body language. I actually, because I had no core before that, I had developed terrible posture, which I didn't realize until the costume designer lovingly told me I looked like an old lady out there. And that was before I started strength training. I was suddenly standing like a powerful person, right? So I was defeated before. The world will defeat you. If you're coming in, slumped over, the world is going to defeat you. If you're coming in powerful, it changes your whole energy about you. And I always say to people, you present yourself as powerful, just see how high and far you can fly.
Yeah,
So
that is good
So
stuff.
yeah, so I have a big philosophy now that, for transition that sticks, that really sticks, that you're not what I did for 40 years. You succeed and then you crash. You succeed and then you crash. You have to be working on this, but the body has to be a part of it too. You have to have both things working.
It's so true. It's the very definition of strength, isn't it? When it has to be both physical and mental. The two go together. I mean, I was very similar to you. And in fact, on my medical records, I only realized this when a copy of my medical record was sent to a consultant that I was going to see. And on the medical record, it said, avoids even trivial exercise. That's what a doctor had recorded about me. So I think some years back, a doctor had said to me, do you do much exercise? And I'd have joked with them and said, oh, I'm allergic to it. No, I don't do anything.
Yeah.
And they actually took that literally, avoids even trivial exercise. So that was my background. And I realized it was only going one way and started strength training alongside my parents who are in their 80s. We did that last year. And I have said in episodes when I've talked about it, that the power that you are talking about, I've experienced myself. And it's like you just hold more weight in the world. That's the exact feeling of what it is. It's like, I am more powerful than I was in every way, a year ago when I first started. And it's incredible stuff. I'm so glad that you talk about that very well on Instagram. And I love as well that you talk about, because this is something I've noticed, and I actually put a little clip of you in one of my videos talking about this.
Oh, thank you.
You talked about how you think that strength training has really helped maintain your skin and your whole youthful look. You have a really youthful look.
Yes.
Tell us about that. How do you think it contributes?
So there's so many levels to this. First, let me just talk from the level of when you are engaging in vigorous exercise. You think about it. You are increasing your circulation. With that increased circulation, more oxygen, more nutrients are going to get into deeper layers of tissue. So that's going to increase that vitality. But you're also going to get a release of growth hormone. You'll get a release of testosterone. So you get these hormones and neurotransmitters that also help us to stay young longer. The other issue, one of the things they found, and this is most marked in strength training, is mitochondria production. It increases that mitochondria. Those are the powerhouses of our cells, and those, is partially responsible for keeping us young. We have greater mitochondria production when we're engaging this. And even more key than that is mitophagy. So mitophagy is when all of those dysfunctional mitochondria that are just kind of taking up space, but they're not doing anything, when they get recycled. And one of the only ways that you can really induce mitophagy is through exercise. And this was a great way that it was that I heard it explained. This research I was listening to said, imagine a subway car, metro car that is packed with people, and nobody else can get in because it's packed. That's what can happen with those dysfunctional mitochondria. They need to be recycled so that you can have that new mitochondria that's really going to help you stay younger. If you have muscle holds itself up, right? Or tone muscle, it's holding itself up. If you have flaccid muscle, it's pulling down on your skeleton. It's pulling, and therefore it's also going to pull down on skin as well. So one of the key things that I really work with people in my gym is the pec area. And it's an area that we don't tend to use in our lives that much. So you really have to do it in the gym. And I really noticed that this is an area where it gets firmed, just gives a more youthful look. And I even noticed it with myself. As you know, I had to have surgery recently. And with that surgery, I wasn't allowed to do any form of exercise for 7 weeks. And that was an area that I noticed. I'm about 4 weeks back training now, going slowly. I lost muscle overall. I have a body composition analysis machine at my gym. So I could see what I had lost, but I could see it in the mirror. They did a study, I think it was in Sweden, where they had participants watch people move and for them to guess their age based on how they were moving. The people that moved young, which is only going to come from exercise and having a strong core, so you're standing up straight, so you have square shoulders, all of those types of things, they consistently guessed them as being younger than they were. And what's really interesting is, because the first time they showed, they couldn't see the people's faces. They were just, then they actually showed their faces, and the people that moved young they would still guess them to be significantly younger. So what they came from that, the conclusion that they came was, a big part of how people judge how old we are is how we move and how we're holding ourselves. I did a while back a show where someone that I've known for years was also there. And she's a little bit younger than I am. And she looked very pretty here. But my heart broke a little bit because even though this looked really pretty, the body looked like it looked like my old auntie's body. And what I realized was her presentation, regardless of this, her presentation was much older than what she actually was.
Yeah. And there's a disconnect there, isn't there, between the body and the face, and the body takes priority in people's perceptions. I can completely see that.
Well, and what concerns me is so many women spend so much time on these treatments, right? And it's like they're being stops from here down, or maybe some people it's here down or whatever. And we have to start thinking of it as all being one thing. And so this is what I say to people. At 62, I am only now the woman I wanted to be when I was 20. But I couldn't be this woman then because I had to live through a lot of stuff. And all women our age, we have been through it. We have survived things. And that has made us freaking amazing, right? So now all we need, we've got this incredible person inside with all this gravitas. Don't let people tell you you're less now. You are more. And all you need is a strong body to match. And as I say, that's the easy part. That's just showing up for your workouts 3 times a week, your strength training workout. That's the easy part.
Yeah. And it's way cheaper than a facelift. That's for sure. Especially these days, some of the prices that people are paying to have their facelift.
I know. I always say, I'm too cheap for that.
Me too. I'm like, I often get, well, I don't often, but from time to time, I'll get people say, why don't you have, I'm just genuinely curious, why haven't you had eye surgery or this, that, or the next thing? Because it would take years off you. And I do just want to say, because I'm not prepared to stump up the money. But I'm also a coward. Like, it's just, I don't want to change.
I'm a coward too. Yeah. I say the same thing. I'm like, boy, you've got to be, you got to be really trusting because.
Yes. You don't know how you're going to look afterwards. And if you don't like it.
Yes.
Just stuck with it.
Yeah, I would say I don't have the guts for it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, people will, and I hate when people say you don't need it, or because it's for some women. I think the thing that really resonates with me is when people say I did not recognize who I was seeing in the mirror, and that's a completely different story. And I think some people do experience more severe facial aging, if you like. It's just almost like a genetic thing, or
so. I'm going to say 2 things to that. Number one, I think, especially a woman that's 50 or over, I have to imagine if she's going to get a facelift or what, she's not doing it for something outside of herself. She's doing it because she wants to like what she sees in the mirror. So what I say is do it and don't apologize for it. Because as a woman, as far as I can see, we're damned if we do and we're damned if we don't. If you age well as a woman, you get accused of having something done. And I'm like, hey, I worked hard for this, but I worked hard for it in the gym. If that's your desire, do it and don't apologize for it, because you're either going to be judged because you're aging well or you're going to be judged because you're not aging well. So as a woman, you're always going to be judged. So do what's right for you. But one caveat with that is if you're going to do it, first clean up your diet, start exercising. Now, I say this because if you know how I eat, so I have what I call my 5-2 plan. I'm very clean diet, Monday through Friday, no alcohol, no sugar, very clean, no simple carbs. I have that stuff on Saturday and Sunday, right? Well, I will tell you, I don't look as good on Monday morning and Tuesday morning because I have inflammation. Yeah. My face gets puffy and I have inflammation from that. So now, that's how I live. So, but if somebody is just starting this, I would say it's going to take a little while, right? But get clean and then watch the inflammation go down. So do that first. Start exercising too, so you get those deeper layers of your tissue invigorated with oxygen and nutrients, and see how far that takes you first. Because even if you still decide that you are going to do the surgical intervention, you're going to get a better result in the end.
Yeah, that is great advice. That should be the standard advice from plastic surgeons as well, to get the best results. And I'm sure they do. To be fair, a lot of them will. I know that people will want me to ask about the full regimen. So, I mean, do you have any skincare secrets beyond the strength training?
I'm a huge believer in vitamin C. I started using vitamin C because I got a sample of a really great product that is unfortunately no longer put out. The biggest thing with vitamin C, though, it's not very stable. So you really have to look for the right product to get that's either the packaging helps it stay stable because air is going to deteriorate it. I'm a huge believer in multi-peptides, which is something that probably got added to my regimen just within the last couple of years.
Mm-hmm. You think you see a difference in your skin since you started using them?
Yes, I do. There's a company, The Ordinary. They have a multi-peptide
Yes, I know it. Yeah,
solution that
absolutely.
I use. I've I say I've probably been using that for 2 years, and I think that I do. I think that has really been helpful.
Sorry to interrupt you there, but just on the peptides and with the ordinary, because it's such a great price and, people don't need to go out
It
and
is.
spend a fortune on these things. But I did a great big, I spent days pulling it together, looking at all the different peptides. And actually, that most of these companies, even the ones that are charging a small fortune for what they're selling, they're all using similar peptides that are made by third parties. So,
Yes. Oh,
if,
yes.
if it feels good on your skin, then, a lot of the peptides are very similar between the products. Just go for what feels right.
Something I'm not able to use, I've tried periodically, is retinol creams or tretinoin or any of that. It's too harsh for my
Yeah.
skin. Whenever I try to use it, it does not work for me. So those are the things that I really do depend on, are the multi-peptides and vitamin C, and then a good moisturizer. And that's, I think,
What do
so
you use?
individual.
People will be wanting to know, what do you use for
You know what
moisturizer?
I use? It's one that from The Ordinary. I'll also send you, because there's also a French moisturizer. I'll send you this as well. That I use that just before I put on my makeup. I find that gives a nicer look to my makeup. So,
And then your diet, you, as you said, 5 days a week, you eat really clean. I'm guessing you're prioritizing those all important whole foods, the natural foods, creating food from scratch.
well, I would like to say you're correct. But this is what happens during Monday through Friday. My schedule is so crazy. So I will tell you that I tend to start my day with a protein bar. I need the protein, especially with strength training. You have to have enough protein that you're supporting that muscle building that you're doing. So I do that, and I tend to have for lunch, I do tend to have a protein shake. Now for dinner, it's purely whole foods. We cook at home. We almost never go out to eat. I'm very fortunate. My husband cooks beautiful food, and my son is now learning to cook beautiful food.
Wonderful.
So I'm very fortunate in that. But we are big believers in cook it yourself, make it yourself. And so dinner, it will be a protein and lots of veggies. Now on the weekends, I do not have any protein shakes or protein bars. That I have more time on the weekends. So that is only whole food sources on the weekends. I'm weigh about 120 pounds. So I'm trying to get somewhere close to 100 grams of protein in a day. I say try to get it 80%, right?
Yeah.
So that means that, because I'm taking the protein bar and the protein shake, and then I'm having some protein with my dinner, probably Monday through Friday, I'm pretty much getting that 100 grams in. But am I on Saturday and Sundays? I may not be. Even though I'm getting whole food sources, it's a little harder to get that much protein in if you're not doing any sort of protein shake or protein bar. So I always say to people, with everything you do, try to get it 80% right.
Yeah,
If you
that's it.
do that, you're doing pretty well.
I think that as well. I mean, my motto is eat naturally most of the time. But, every day I find myself, there's a particular brand here of chocolate called Galaxy, and my youngest son loves it. And so we have it in the house, and I do find it's just about every single day I'm into that cupboard and I take 1 or 2 pieces. I've been able to train myself quite well, but it's like, I need that little, and then everything else is kind of, is pretty good for me. But
Is it a dark chocolate?
it's not dark chocolate. I also love dark chocolate, and I have plenty of that too. But no, this is just all out something
Milk
I
chocolate.
do that I shouldn't, that I'm just like, well, I cannot be perfect.
So this is my whole thing. I live on what I call this 5-2 plan. And the reason I do is because I'm not somebody that can deprive myself. If I feel that I've been deprived, I will be like a little child and I was
Me too.
deprived. If I know that I have space for myself every weekend, That's when I'm going to have the chocolate chip cookie I
Yeah.
want. That's when I'm going to have the wine. That's when I'm going to have the bagel. That's when I'm going to have pasta. That's when I'm going to have all of those things. Are those? I know that there is space for that there. Then those 5 days, these are when I'm clean, and I'm able to do that. And I feel it's very much a principle that a lot of people can do, because it's just like there's time for work and there's time for play.
Yeah.
But we all have to know that we have a time set aside for that. That tells that inner child in us that there is time for you over here. There's time for you to have that, but it's on this day.
I want to talk about, you mentioned your diagnosis. I mean, that is something that really must have caught you off guard, to say the least. I mean, for those who don't know, can you just tell us what happened? You had
Yes.
this.
So I got a diagnosis of endometrial cancer. And I will say, what I like to say is, if you have anything going on, get it checked out. Because the reason that I'm so lucky is because it was caught so early. What I had was, I noticed, and it could have been going on for a while, I noticed that in my first morning pee, there would be something only about that long, that if you can imagine, like a piece of, not even the thickness of a piece of twine,
Mm-hmm.
that was there. So that's what led me to get this checked. It was early stage. So fortunately, there was no spread, which meant that the surgery, I did have to have a total hysterectomy.
Yeah.
But there was, it hadn't spread into my lymph nodes at this
Thank
point.
goodness.
And yes, so that is really key, that I was able to have the surgery and not have to have chemo or radiation. So, anything like that, I really wish hysteroscopies, which is sort of the first thing that you go through before they do the biopsy. I really wish that that was just standard operating procedure
Yeah.
for women, maybe every 5 years over the age of 40 or whatever, because, there's so many women that it's caught very late. So it's certainly a much easier thing to deal with if it's caught early. But one of the things, going back to the strength training, that I like to say to people is, because this strength training so changed me as a person. Today, if I meet someone who is underestimating me, I think to myself, well, they don't know who they're dealing with. And that just comes
They're gonna find out.
like I'm this powerful person. But I will tell you, when I got that cancer diagnosis, that was the first voice in my head too. Well, that cancer doesn't know who it's dealing with. And, that translates into every area of your life, and including something like this. And whenever you are making decisions from a place of power, it's going to be a different decision you will make than when you're coming from a place of fear. So I was coming from, that cancer doesn't know who it's dealing with, as opposed to panic and paralyzation.
Yeah.
And it will serve you well in your life with any type of challenge that comes to you in your life.
And I mean, have you made any lifestyle changes as a result of that diagnosis? 'Cause I'm thinking about things like hormone replacement and supplements and so on. And a diagnosis like that does cause you to sort of take a step back and think, what's your approach? Has it changed at all?
Well, what I am going to be investigating is maybe a very mild dose of testosterone. So to explain, in my case, although it had not spread to the ovaries, if it came back, that would be one of the first places it would come back.
Okay.
So although I didn't want to have my ovaries taken out, at the same time, I was thinking, do I want this always hanging over my head and to have these? Now, the problem with this, however, and it's a big thing you're trying to weigh, is and each woman has to make her own decision about that. Your ovaries are not producing, after menopause, are not producing a great deal of estrogen, some, but not a lot. But they are producing 40 to 50% of your testosterone. And we think of testosterone as just being for men, but it also is important for us, for bone density, muscle mass, sex drive as well. So, So I wanted to get 12 weeks out before I started introducing an additional type of hormone therapy. And I'm going to be meeting. Maybe we could talk about this in the future. I
Yeah.
could give you my intel. I have begun just 3 weeks ago using vaginal estradiol, which even in the case of hormone sensitive cancers has shown in studies to be safe. So I am using that, but I'm not using any other type of hormone
Yeah.
replacement therapy at this point. But
Makes sense.
I'm not a candidate for, because of this cancer, I'm not a candidate for your typical HRT, but I'll be meeting with a specialist and looking at all the things that I can do.
And I mean, I'm guessing you were already strong beforehand, but I'm guessing that these last few months, you've really learned the definition of what it means to be strong. What has it taken, do you think, to stay positive? And do you get your sort of difficult days with it, or do you find you're just now, okay, this is how it's going to go, and you found your momentum again?
I mean, listen, I will tell you, the day before my surgery, I was a mess. But I was a mess, not for the typical reasons. I was a mess because it was taking me right back to my childhood of all those surgeries. But other than that, I will tell you that I feel that I've just been in a good place to handle it. Now, you know how I said I had that week away that really changed my life?
Yeah.
For years, I have wanted to recreate that week, because that week literally did change the trajectory of my life. And we would go back to it, that cabin, subsequently, every year. And I would look up at that cabin every year and say, this changed my life. And I would think, if only I could bring other women to something like this, I could do what this has done for me, because it was so profound. And then one of my clients said to me one day, she said, Beth, I think you need to do a retreat at this place that she had gone to called Emaloa. And as soon as she said it, it was like zing, hit me right here.
Mm-hmm.
So I went on a scouting mission to Emaloa. 4 days later, I was diagnosed
Oh,
with
wow.
endometrial cancer. Now, I will tell you that having been there changed how I went through this whole process. And part of it was, when I was at Emaloa, I was only there for 3 days. But you're not scrolling on your phone all the time. You're connecting to yourself, and you're connecting to other people that also, whether their goal is in a career goal or whether it's a health goal, they're all people that are working toward that goal. And really, they're all the same. It's all the same tools we're all using.
Yeah.
So my body was clean. I was in this incredible place in the middle of the rainforest overlooking the ocean. And I was really able to connect to myself. So that was key. So it got me in a really good place. So when I got back and I got that diagnosis, there's 2 things that I did. The first thing was, I said, let's not make this bigger than it has to be. So I decided that in my household, this diagnosis was going to be called the Nuisance.
The Nuisance.
It wasn't going to be called cancer. It wasn't going to be any of those connotations. It's called the Nuisance in our
Temporary
house.
nuisance.
This is it. Temporary. Exactly. And then the next thing I said was, let's identify the education in this. And what I decided for me was, perhaps going through this experience was the exact education I needed to lead this retreat and help women the way I wanted to help women. And that was key in my mindset as I went through it. So one thing I was doing was, I had what I called my fort, which was, I would envision myself at Emaloa helping women I wanted to help. And that filled me with this wonderful positivity all the time. If ever I started to go down that negative road, I would turn my mind to thinking of that Emaloa. And that helped me sail through it. And through it, I will tell you that I did feel like the universe was saying, this is the last bit of the education you need. You need this to become who you need to become to do what you want to do in this world.
Oh, that's extraordinary. There's such a powerful message in there for all of us. A great lesson. Thank you so much, Beth. I know I have to let you go. Tell us, so I will link to your Instagram in the description so people can find you there. Where else can people find you?
Well, Instagram also, I really would love people to check out this retreat that I'm doing.
Yes.
In Emaloa.
Okay.
It's in May, the 17th to the 22nd. It's going to be teaching people how to move properly. We're going to exercise, but we're also going to be using the environment. We're hiking to a waterfall.
Wow.
And so using our bodies, so experiencing how wonderful these bodies are, but also with those workshops, understanding, as I got to understand for that year-long program, how the brain actually works and how we can overcome those negative voices that come into it, how we can have systems to overcome them, and how we are many times creating our own lives. I always tell people, every second you have millions of bits of information coming in to you, but your brain can only take in 50 of them. Which 50 is it going to be? You are sort of deciding what's important to you, and your brain's going to pick those 50. So learning how your brain can pull in the most important.
I'm sold. I'm just thinking, no, I can't get there in May, but if I was on your side, I would.
You can tell I'm really excited. I'm really excited because it's experiential. I know that my life right now would not be what it was had that week not happened. And then all of these things that have gone on through, really my whole life, really, had they not happened, that I couldn't put this all together and share this with people and go, hey, I'm going to fast track you. It took me 40 years, but you can get it in 5 days. So
love it.
So yes, you can tell I'm really, really excited about doing this thing that I've wanted to do for so many years.
Oh, I know it's going to be fantastic. Beth, thank you so much for sharing in the way you have today. You're a bright, shining light, and it's been an absolute joy.
Thank you. It's been wonderful talking to you, somebody that really gets it.
My huge thanks to Beth there for sharing her inspirational story with us, and you're going to find links to her Instagram page and website in the description below so you can keep up with her motivational content and her retreats. If you haven't already, then do hit subscribe or follow to keep up with the latest from us on the Honest channel. And if you'd like to access more from me, including regular vlogs and behind the scenes content, then you'll find a link below to join the channel as a member. And for a monthly dose of inspiration delivered straight to your inbox, make sure to sign up for my newsletter where I share my latest episodes and articles so you don't miss out. Until next time though, thanks for being here today.